Here we are as we continue these conversations on AI. What we're also realizing is that AI isn't just learning, it's also reasoning, it's creating, it's making decisions in ways that we have never imagined. And this session that is coming up, it's definitely going to dive into blurring lines between human and machine cognition, exploring how AI, it's not just mimicking, it's reshaping and it's evolving with the way that we define the word intelligence. So joining us for this session is a visionary leader who has driven groundbreaking innovations, including founding of Digitate and shaping the future of cognitive automation. Joining us for this session, ladies and gentlemen, is Dr. Harik Winn, Chief Technology Officer at TCS. And leading this conversation is Pradeep Menon, Managing Director, HSBC Technology India, who heads one of the country's largest GCCs, which of course is driving agile and impactful technology. Over to you all.
Yes. Great. So thank you, Dr. Winn, for making time. I think this is, I was just thinking, probably more into Skynet territory with Terminator 2, right? We're talking about cyborgs and machine intelligence, and that's what the topic is going to be about. We've got two topics. We've got Dr. Winn, who's joining us, and then we'll have Tarun join us later. We're going to talk about how machines are flipping from the intelligence networks that we have today, and so how humans are making that transition and how it's going to play out. And the other session is going to be about how this impacts product engineering. I mean, we've all seen machines get ready, intelligence get ready, but is engineering able to keep pace with it, right? The engineering methods, the products that we build. So those are the two topics they're going to talk about, right? So with that, I'm going to get started. Dr. Winn, we were talking earlier, and this is got a lot to do with the fact that increasingly, machines will see a lot more augmentation as compared to automation, right? Eventually, that taking over concept has got to be thought through. So what are your views on that? I mean, how do you see that whole thing play out?
So first of all, indeed a pleasure to be here. And so I think, when I look at AI, and I think most of the common use cases that everyone talks about today, it's all about actually what we call as assist kind of use cases, which is all about actually improving productivity of people. It's sort of focused on automation, if you will. But I think the bigger opportunity for this technology is actually what we call as augmentation. So basically making people much better, making people make better decisions. Because what you actually find in all domains of knowledge work is that there is a big gap between sort of average and elite we're talking about the example of, let's say, an insurance underwriter. The elite underwriter and the average underwriter, the gap is very, very large. And the reason why that gap happens is because the elite underwriter actually makes contextually optimal decisions based on a lot of tacit knowledge that the person has acquired over a period of time. A machine can now actually augment, let's say, a junior underwriter and augment their ability to make better decisions and thereby making them make decisions that are elite by design. So I think making human better, or actually making people better, sort of this concept of human-centered AI is really sort of where I think the world is going to shift.
Going to move towards, yeah. But that also brings me to this, right? End of the day, human beings have always considered ourselves to be the brainier aspects of what technology surrounds us, right? We built the technology, and eventually we did think that we would be in charge. But there's a point in time, and even if you look at the evolution of tech, we have generally felt that tech, it'll get more and more, eventually get better at doing a lot of things, but it's the more mundane tasks that it's going to be. But if you look at the world of creativity, and again, we spoke about that, we're increasingly seeing that tech's doing a lot of creative stuff in as much as it's doing the mundane, right? This again is a clear sign of the sheer machine intelligence, the way it's growing, and you do a lot of research in that field. So what do humans have to be scared about?
Actually, I'm not sure whether we have to be scared about the technology, but actually, if I look at you talked about creativity, so I talk about the fact that if you think about all of us, we have two types of creativity, what I call a small c creativity, which is all about actually making a contextually optimal decision based using known options. Uh, then there is big C creativity, is actually defining new options themselves, right? So for example, if I give an example in financial services, it's all about, let's say, defining a contextually optimal, let's say, investment portfolio for me as an individual based on my life cycle stage and the needs and so on and so forth. That's sort of small C creativity. Big C creativity is creating new product or an instrument by itself, right? And so this technology, actually, if you think about AI and Gen AI, they are actually very, very good at actually helping people make much better small C creativity decisions, because it has actually vast amounts of knowledge that it about all products, all possibilities, trade-offs, that it can actually do almost a lot of the what if and if what scenario playing to be able to actually help me make better decisions. It can also actually be, interestingly, be used to actually improve my big C creativity by actually almost questioning me about why am I actually thinking about it, some product this way or some decisions this way, and actually help me make better decisions. So in a sense, this technology has the ability to improve both the small C creativity as well as the big C creativity of individuals, and which is where it is fascinating. But to your point, I think when you do use technology like this, the role of people fundamentally shifts. So if there is, the role of people shifts from doers of work, if you will, to trainers and interrogators of machines, reviewer of work done by machines, and actually owners of critical thinking and creativity. And that's a fundamental shift. So if there is something to be, quote, afraid of, it's not actually sort of, if you will, replacing, but actually asking the question, how does these roles continuously shift? And these roles will keep shifting. Because as machines become more and more intelligent, the roles of people will continuously keep shifting. So that's perhaps a big challenge for every individual as well as every organization.
That's interesting. Just staying on that topic of creativity, I was just thinking, generally whatever machines do, they do very well. Well is a bit of a subjective thing, but they do it very fast. And increasingly, we are seeing that machines learn, right? And whether it be reinforced learning or otherwise, other learning strategies that we could use. Does it mean that we are trending towards even commoditization of relatively higher end skills like creativity?
I would say that basically the ability of getting sort of almost, as we were saying earlier, sort of intelligence on tap or intelligence on demand, or sort of, if you think about just like utilities, you will actually probably have intelligence delivered to you, if you will, on demand at relatively low costs in the future. Where I think the game will consequently shift is how do you use the intelligence to actually rethink the work that you're doing as an individual, as a team, or as an organization. So actually using this relatively, the cost of intelligence will probably keep coming down by a factor of 10 or so on a year-on-year basis. So it will become more or less free over time. So for organizations and individuals, you'll have to become adept at sort of what I often say as this inventing and adopting work next practices. It's not about actually becoming good at adopting best practices. Every organization will have to actually continuously reinvent itself by defining work next practices that will probably redefine the reason why they are existing. And that's really sort of a big opportunity as well as a threat for every organization.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, again, there's this whole concept of predictability that you have. Human beings can be fairly, with few exceptions, of course, can be fairly predictable. We know that if we subject a certain process and if there's a certain learning mechanism that kicks in, human beings tend to not be that different. Again, there's always statistical aberrations that you can think of, but broadly. But machines can sometimes be inherently chaotic, right? That learning process can have unpredictability come in. For a world that we are used to living in, whether it be software development, and we were just talking about that the earlier day, I think predictability has a certain weight when it comes to working in a process-oriented world, in a world where everything seems to dovetail into each other. The increasing amount of unpredictability that will creep in because of machine intelligence or machines learning at their own, sometimes at the expense of humans, how is that going to play out? You do research in this field, so
Yeah.
how do you see that playing out?
So I would say that actually the machine intelligence is not always unpredictable. I mean, actually there are two different types of...
No, don't get me wrong. I didn't mean always unpredictable. I just say that there's that nuance.
Yeah, so I think because there are machines that actually do logical reasoning, which is usually based on causality rules that the domain has defined. Then there are the newer generation of Gen AI models are actually inherently designed using analogical reasoning, which basically uses correlation and co-occurrence rather than causation as a way to sort of learn and adapt. And that is actually, on one hand, makes the machine a lot more adaptive and hence appear a lot more human-like and intelligent. On the other hand, the flip side of it is that it becomes inherently more non-deterministic. In fact, I keep saying that hallucination is not a bug, it's actually a feature. I mean, people have worked very hard to actually get the machine to, if you will, behave like people. Because if you ask me the same question twice, I will not give you exactly the same answer. So I think that is indeed, I mean, I think so you have both sides of the coin. Now, what that is doing is that when you build an AI solution, and to your point, you have to actually be very clear about where do you use logical reasoning and where do you use analogical reasoning. So you don't want to use analogical reasoning where you want predictability, you want explainability and things of that sort, because inherently those models are not good for doing that. That also raises an interesting challenge that if not engineered well, you actually run the risk of creating what I often call as artificial insanity, which is basically at runtime, because these models continuously evolve, they start behaving in ways that actually were not realized or seen when you actually build the system in the first place. To your point, that means that the way we have been testing or assuring any software, if you will, or any product that we put in production, that entire thing will have to be redone because now the models will self-learn and change. In a sense, the behavior of the software will actually evolve during the lifetime of that software. So the ability to detect an emergent condition that is happening in some sense, real time, and then adapt to it, will become a core part of actually sort of building any form of AI solutions.
Yeah, and again, because you're a research practitioner in this field, I just want to ask you, there's a lot of cutting edge that you can see when it comes to the science of machine intelligence, right? But closer home to India and some of the work that you've been doing, what could be applications of machine intelligence that seems to be closer to becoming a reality in the Indian context than something that we'd like to know? What would that be?
Well, I think the opportunity for India is to actually go from what I would call as, I mean, we've been saying this as, I mean, today, if you look at a lot of these AI models and so on, they are sort of task-level co-pilots, right? That help you sort of improve productivity of individual tasks and so on. Going from there to sort of role level, what I often call as genius partner. So if I can sort of every role for every domain, if you going back to our earlier example of an underwriter, can I actually build a genius partner for every underwriter such that that underwriter becomes, say, 10x better or becomes 5x better much faster and so on and so forth. So because India has an enormous sort of wealth of sort of talent for knowledge work, actually building these genius partners that will dramatically improve the level of the quality of work that we are able to produce will go a long way. So I think that is where I mean, the huge opportunity for India.
And again, just thinking out, it's possible that 20 years from now, we're used to meetings where everybody is a colleague, but there could be a machine colleague sometime from now, building on your machine intelligence research that you're into. And when we have a colleague on that table who's probably not of human origin, that will lead to some interesting dynamics on the way these things will play out. Do you also consider
absolutely. I think, I mean, the future of workforce is going to be hybrid with people and machines working shoulder to shoulder and actually each augmenting the other. So it's not just the machine augmenting people, but also people augmenting machines through, if you will, reinforcement learning or feedback-based systems and so on, which leads to interesting both opportunities and challenges. The challenge is actually going to be, as I said earlier, changes in roles of people, right? The roles will constantly keep shifting because as machines become more and more intelligent, the people's roles will actually keep shifting. In fact, it is not just about the individual, but also the organization design will also have to change, right? Because the entire teams of one type will actually shift to another type. So perhaps a bigger challenge for the future is to actually design organizations for change, not just for functionality that we are sort of today used to.
Interesting. So cultural, organizational journeys, and they're assimilating this kind of learning or cultural thing.
Yeah,
It
so
is also
organizational change management actually kind of talent transformation and organization transformation, and that's not just a one-time thing, but a continuous thing for the foreseeable future is what will be needed to be successful.
Good. Fantastic. We've got time for one question from the audience if someone has a topic to make on machine intelligence.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
There is a saying which goes, tough times build tough men build a better world will make people soft, and soft people will create a tough world. Are we getting into that loop? Because historically, if we see, this cycle keeps repeating, this loop happens, there is a lot of focus on AI and how, I would not say inefficient, but less efficient the Gen Z and millennials are. Where do we see ourselves in the next 15, 20 years in the working ecosystem?
Why don't you take a stab at it and then I will.
It's an interesting question and a difficult question. I wish I had a crystal ball to give you a precise answer. I guess I would probably reflect on this slightly differently. I think if I were to ask the question, what should sort of students that are graduating today, what will I advise them to do, right? I would say that actually, what should the education system do, for example? I think it is important for us to actually build talent that has the ability, we are sort of fostering the ability of learning to learn rather than learning skills, right? Because half-life of a skill, for example, has shrunk from 30 years to 6 years and it's shrinking fast. What that essentially means is that everyone will probably have to reinvent itself every 5 to 6 years. All of our children, for guaranteed, will probably reinvent themselves at least half a dozen times in their career, which means the ability of people to have the courage to jump into something new, learn the new stuff, and actually adapt to constant changes is going to become paramount importance, which means that a lot of the soft skills, for example, things like ability to deal with ambiguity or being able to analyze a complex situation, have a point of view, have conviction, right? Creatively analyze a situation or be creatively dissatisfied with the first answer that you get, which is actually one of the challenges that you're seeing with the Gen Zs today. These are going to become far, far, far more important than, I would say, any hard skills that you can learn. So I think it will require a fair bit of change, both in our education system as well as, in fact, if every individual has to get retrained every 5, 6 years, it raises a very interesting opportunity. So, I mean, we keep talking about things like skilling for AI. I would actually flip the thing and actually say that a more interesting thing is AI for skilling, which is actually how do we use technology to reinvent people? Because remember that this reinvention of people is not sort of one size fits all. You'll have to actually do this very personalized. Every individual will have different needs and aspirations, right? So I think this whole concept of talent engagement, talent transformation is probably going to become far, far, far more important than what we are actually realizing today. So it's not about just train people on AI. That's the easy part of the problem. That we can do in sort of lock, stock, and barrel. Actually using AI to completely change people is actually where the real game is going to be. And that's what is going to determine the success and failure of organizations or potentially even countries.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
It was lovely talking to you.